In Portugal in 2009, they had a smidgen under 60%. A smidgen under 60%. In 2005, they had 64.25%. In 2002, just a smidgen under 63%. Well, here's an email to Norm at normandgoldman.com from exactly the kind of people I'm talking to and about. Jack from Illinois. Norm, I'm 18 years old. I'm a college student and I'm not voting. I'm not going to vote because I just started really paying attention to politics in the last 3 weeks. Jack, I hope our show has something to do with that. Stick with me, son. Here you go. This is Jack. I read the paper every day, but I do not feel I am an educated voter. Jack, that hasn't gotten in the way of some people.
I
mean, look, that guy has to be president of the United States. He wasn't educated about anything either. Jack says, I don't want to vote just because I can. I want to make a calculated choice. I live in Illinois and I'm appalled at the debt we are in. I would vote Republican just because I want to see some fiscal responsibility. Jack, you need to call me. We need to talk on the air. It's 1-888-321-6001. If you're listening to this show, and I know you are because you sent me an email that I just read on the air to Norm at normandgoldman.com. If you're 18 and you just got into politics 3 weeks ago, Jack, you and I need to spend some time chatting because I was once you, and I'd like to share some of my experience with you and see if we can make some progress here, Jack. The number is 1-888-321-6001. Now, Jack, we are in a huge fiscal hole. The truth is the Republicans put us there. You're 18, so when Bush came into office, of course, you were just a kid. Let me tell you, it was the Republicans that did all that spending. When Jimmy Carter, now this is long before you were born, Jack, when Jimmy Carter left office in January of 1981, our national debt, the entirety of America's history of debt, was under $1 trillion. Bill Clinton, the only Democratic president we had between 1981 and 2008. The only Democratic president. We had Reagan for 8 years. We had George W. Bush for 8 years. And we had George Herbert Walker Bush for 4. And we had Clinton for 8. Bill Clinton actually balanced the budget and was paying down the debt. When George W. Bush left office, the national debt was $13 trillion. Ronald Reagan rolled up $3 trillion of national debt. George Herbert Walker Bush added more, and George W. Bush totally exploded it. If you want fiscal responsibility, the last thing you want to do is vote for the Republicans. In addition to that, Jack, let me offer you this thought. Christine O'Donnell, who is a Tea Partier and keeps talking about fiscal responsibility, would extend tax cuts for the top 2%, and that would add a $700 billion extra hole in the budget.
But what I'm proposing is to give these to make sure that the tax cuts for all Delawareans do not expire this January. You have said that you will stop the tax cuts for the so-called rich. What you fail to realize is that the so-called rich are the small business owner, the dry cleaner down the street, the pizza shop owner who makes $300,000 before they pay their 4 employees.
And after they pay their 4 employees, they no longer have $300,000. They are no longer in the $250,000 bracket. They've been able to deduct all of that. Christine O'Donnell, you're not qualified to vote, let alone be a United States Senator. Jack, you want fiscal responsibility? You want to vote Republican because you think they're fiscally responsible? They're the guys who handed us this problem, and they have said publicly, Jack, that they will not offset $700 billion in tax cuts for the top 2%. They'll simply add it onto the national debt, which is already $14 trillion. So, Jack, give me a call. Let's talk. We really need to talk. I really like talking to the youngsters because, you know, they're the future. And, you know, look, my time is going to be up one day soon. They're taking over. Now, earlier, we got an email, and I read it on the air from an 18-year-old named Jack who said he didn't know enough because he just started thinking about politics 3 weeks ago, and I invited him to call, and here he is. Jack, thanks for calling.
Hi, Norm.
Hey, man. Well, listen, I'm really glad you sent me that email. Did you really start just paying attention to politics 3 weeks ago?
Well, yeah, I've always been a fan of, the comedy, like Daily Show and the Colbert Report. I always thought that was funny. But I started delivering pizzas. I got a job and I listen to the radio when I'm doing it, and I started listening to your show, and that's when I really started paying attention to politics. I also started reading the paper a couple of months ago. So.
And you sent me the email saying that you would vote Republican if you were going to vote because you think they're more fiscally responsible. Why do you think they're more fiscally responsible?
Well, they are for small government, so less spending. But
that's what they say.
As you pointed out, they're not because of the whole tax cut things.
Well, George W. Bush passed along with the Republican Congress, passed a Medicare prescription drug benefit. Now, that's for people on Medicare over 65, and that was $600 billion. $600 billion totally unpaid for. He cut taxes twice, including $700 billion for the top 2%. He did 2 wars without paying for them and borrowed all this money. He left office with a $1.5 trillion annual budget deficit and has ballooned our national debt to $13 trillion. There's been $1 trillion added with Mr. Obama since he came in. But the Republicans have no basis to say that they're fiscally responsible. And, Jack, they're promising now to extend the entirety of the Bush tax cuts, which will blow literally a $4 trillion hole in the budget deficit for the next 10 years. I personally, Jack, you may not want to hear this, but the truth is I'd let the whole thing expire. Because if you get rid of all the Bush tax cuts, you let it all expire. Yes, we're all going to have to pay more taxes. We will then be within striking range of having a balanced budget. That's my view. Now, I would cut military spending. There's tremendous waste, fraud, and abuse. If you've been with us for 3 weeks, Jack, you've heard Winslow Wheeler, I hope, talking about all this waste, fraud, and abuse in the military. So, Jack, do you feel like you're ready to vote now?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you still going to vote Republican?
No.
Well, Jack, here's the thing. Let me offer you this thought. I really appreciate you finding our show and listening because you're the future of this country. And if you choose not to decide, you still made a choice. And I think you figured that out, and that's why you're starting to read the paper. I got into politics when I was a little kid. I mean, President Kennedy was assassinated when I was 4, and that started it. I mean, the 60s were going crazy when I was a little kid, and I was fascinated by it all. But you have fascinating times as well. You just had the first African-American president elected in the history of the United States. The United States is in a very precarious position here. You as a citizen, you can make a difference. You're 18. You've got your whole life ahead of you. So, Jack, keep paying attention, keep listening. I will keep teaching, and you keep reading. Go out on the internet, read stuff, and because the future is yours. I'm going to be dead and buried, long before you're done. So, Jack, thanks for being with us, and call me again, okay?
All right.
All right, man. That was fantastic. We are today as well. We discovered an 18-year-old. I believe it was Jack from Illinois, and we made him kind of an instant radio star. He wrote me an email saying, Norm, I just started getting into politics 3 weeks ago. I'm 18 years old, and I discovered your show, and I deliver pizzas for a living, and I read his email, and he said, I'm not going to vote because I don't feel educated enough. I just started paying attention to politics 3 weeks ago, and I'm reading the papers, but I don't feel qualified. So I read that email on the air. I asked Jack to call in, and he did about an hour later, and we had a very nice conversation where I was just giving him a lot of facts, and we work with the truth. So that generated a lot of discussion. Why vote?